All right, let's kick this off. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Thursday Brown Bag Sales Training Session. Joel Kreuzwick's going to join us this morning and talk through auto DevOps. I think it's really important that we have a clear picture on what that means and how we can articulate it to prospects and customers. So thanks for doing this, Joel. Appreciate it. I'll hand it over to you. We are recording.
Okay. I have promptly lost the window. Here we go. Let me get myself into presentation mode and we'll get things shared out here. Apologies for that slight delay. Okay, so interesting. It decided to slide everything out of the way on me here. All right, now everybody seeing slides? Good. Okay, and sorry if I appear a little flustered. We had something interesting happen in the demo environment in the last few minutes, and so it really altered my plans. What I want to talk to you about a little bit, I was actually asked to talk a little bit about auto DevOps, and I started giving this little thought. And what I've heard from a lot of people is auto DevOps is part of CE. Why does it matter? Let's talk about the differentiators and get people to buy it. Well, the reality is this auto DevOps functionality points us to new products, new sales, new versions of our product in a really unique way. And so when we think of it from a storytelling perspective, first and foremost, you know where we are on the Forrester Wave. You've all seen this a million times. You don't get there, though, without telling a good story. It's about strategy. You can bet that auto DevOps has a huge part that it played in getting us to this picture. Okay, this didn't happen alone on its own. So real quick overview on technology, like what in the world, when we talk auto DevOps, does it mean? Well, it means that the list of items on the left side of this picture is achieved by leveraging the technologies on the right side of this picture. Auto DevOps is not just GitLab, it's GitLab plus Kubernetes, Helm, Docker, Prometheus. If you want all this stuff to work, it leverages all these other technologies. So there is a dependency there. That said, these technologies on the right-hand side are the technologies everybody's asking us about anyway. So it's really ideal. It's driving not only the adoption of new technologies by doing this auto DevOps thing, but it's helping clients achieve their new technology goals, especially in the next year. There's a lot of Kubernetes initiatives out there. So from this perspective, we've all seen the I2P flow. And yeah, this is the old one. I put it up for a specific reason. This particular conversation that we've been having for the past year is really intriguing to a lot of clients. They want to understand all these different phases and what it means to them. And we break out all the different tools they use. I highlighted in green what it looks like from an auto DevOps perspective. So those green items are things that auto DevOps touches today. And so when you think about it, you can argue that it may touch more things than that. But the reality is these are the primary places that people think of when we talk auto DevOps. Well, in the context of our new workflow, if you go to the website today, this story changes. So for instance, I had this conversation with Mercedes-Benz this week, and we talked a little bit about things, and they were kind of fixated on the code and the commit and the test areas, right? This is where they just locked themselves in, and they didn't give this concept of the deployment a whole lot of thought, despite a huge container conversation. So from here, let's talk about what happens when the workflow updates. And this is where I'm going to start to give you gifts, okay? So I'm going to put on my Santa hat here. I'm going to take this thing next level. What happens when we use the updated workflow? Well, what we're finding out is a lot of enterprises are struggling most with that middle icon of this workflow. And they're talking a lot about the left and the right sides, but they're not so much focused on the middle, and it's become a big silo, a barrier for them. So CI and packaging, these can be huge holes, especially in the enterprise. We're targeting the enterprise. A lot of them have the CA release automation tools, IBM's Urban Code, Microsoft TFS, all these different functionalities, and a lot of large scale tool sets. And Adam Olson and I actually had a conversation with somebody at GM a couple weeks ago, and it was really interesting that they came right into this and said, gosh, you know what? You guys fill that hole perfectly. That CI and packaging piece, it's killing us. Packaging, by the way, if that term seems ambiguous to you, it's the whole idea of your dependencies, your integrations, everything that's needed to get your software to market and have it be effective. Okay, so you're going to put various components together, package it, and then release it. Interestingly enough, when you focus on the packaging conversation, the release process conversation comes along, and it's never the same twice. Nobody has that same conversation. Release is a loaded, ambiguous term in the market today. So from that perspective, if you can shape what is being released and the quality of what's being released, you can now affect the release conversation as well. So, I kind of put something in gold at the bottom here. If we can tell the right story here, it's enabling clients to see a new way to connect the left side to the right side. There's a lot of planning conversations, big room planning, PPM, all these different concepts out there. The right side, we're talking about release automation all the time. There's a big gap in the middle. So I apologize for all the bullets on one page. I didn't know a better way to do this, but let's talk today versus tomorrow. So today, Auto DevOps gives immediate client ROI. Okay, that's a pretty easy thing to see. It gives you best practices, and it standardizes and baselines the approach that a client should have. Heroku and Heroku-ish, these technologies that we pull on in order to enable Auto DevOps, that's what looks at the code and says, oh, okay, that's Ruby, that's C, that's Go code. Let's build it and test it this way, okay? And it provides a baseline approach. And it gives you kind of that minimal pipeline configuration. So out of the gates, Auto DevOps says we're going to build, we're going to do a static analysis of your code, run a basic test pack, and have it ready for review or deploy. So that's 4 different jobs across 3 stages. I was at State Farm last week. They've been using GitLab for quite a while. They have 2 stages with 2 jobs, and that's their pipeline. And I kind of challenged them and said, look, guys, our baseline for Auto DevOps is these 4 jobs. At least get there. And they went, wow, we weren't really thinking about that. Okay, so this challenges people to go next level if they're just doing the bare minimum. The other thing here that's a really big deal is it simplifies that cloud native shift. Everybody's talking about it, nobody's doing it. Okay, that there's people trying to do it, but they don't know how. They're asking us tons of questions. Ericsson's been asking us a ton of questions about how do we get into the cloud? How do we do this? How are you doing this? And so this simplifies that quite a bit. In fact, at the end of this slide deck, there's actually a link for something that Brendan O'Leary recorded overnight. Just a short 7-minute video where he leverages some of our new functionality to deploy something into a Kubernetes cluster, and it's cloud native, and it's done all through GitLab in just a few minutes. So that, that whole thing, Auto DevOps makes auto deployment a reality, and it makes it faster for our clients without them having a learning curve. They don't have to learn what in the world is YAML code. They don't have to learn how to configure things. They just push the button and they watch the monkey run, right? That's how this thing works. So what about tomorrow? What's tomorrow? We're going to continue the auto trend. And from a sales perspective, this is where the rubber really meets the road. So when we look at the auto trend into auto security, auto release, auto revert, auto metrics, all those different things have been pulled out of blogs by Mark Punsack and by others. The auto security piece, I sat down with Kathy Wang, talked to her for a while. This is exciting stuff. If you want to use auto release, auto revert, auto metrics, some of those kind of things, chances are you're going to want to start using things like canary deployments. Well, guess what? Now you need EEP. You can't do this with CE. If you want a really good, stable environment with canary deploys, now you're talking EEP. You jumped right over EES. And so that is a big part of the auto release and the cloud native conversation. The auto security thing drives us right to EEU. And this story really resonates, right? The next year, the SAST, DAST, and recon functionality, which is, a static analysis of your code as it sits, and then the next stage of start that code up, run the application, check it for vulnerabilities again, and then recon, deploy that app to its environment, check the environment for vulnerabilities. Okay, all those things are really resonant stories, but when you take that one step further and say, what if we automatically fix some of these things as we run into them? Maybe your open source code that you're using has a vulnerability in it that's been patched. Today, most pipelines will stall out and clients will have to go in and manually figure out what's going on. There's this vision we've got of, hey, what if we go out and just download that patch automatically and see if everything passes so it's ready to go? And then you just give us a go, no go on the deployment of that. Or maybe it's the middle of the night here and something happens where there's a vulnerability detected overseas, right? And so a patch is created, you're not aware of it, you come in the morning, your code is ready to deploy, patch and all. Okay, so some of those kind of visions really resonate with people because they're struggling with this stuff today. Again, that is EEU adoption. Nobody else is really doing that today. Let your mind wander a little bit to what else this might enable. Last item here is the auto DevOps is the gateway drug to Kubernetes. And that's even more so the fact after looking at 10.2, where we have cluster management built into GitLab. Okay, there's this great functionality of, oh, did you want to deploy something to Kubernetes? Here, just push it out. We'll help you real quick. It's push button 1, 2, and 3. Voila, you're live on the web and everything is good to go. So I'm looking at that as it's one of these things where everybody wants to do Kubernetes. Auto DevOps simplifies the path to get there.
Hey, Joel.
Yes, sir.
Hey, question for you on this slide. You said earlier that Auto DevOps plus Kubernetes, I think you said, basically makes the customer need premium right away. So they jump right over starter. Mm-hmm. Is that correct?
It is if they want to use things like canary deploys and deploy boards. And if they're using Kubernetes, the draw of that will be extremely big.
Okay, I think, yeah, so you answered the question I was going to ask, which is what features specifically that are in premium would lead to that jump right over starter? And I think you said deploy boards and canary deploys.
Yes.
Okay.
So hey, Joel, and that ties into the auto revert, right? You can't do auto revert if you don't have Prometheus monitoring built onto it, correct?
There's, I don't know what auto revert exactly entails, which pieces, but yeah, I tend to agree with you, John.
So it basically, from what I understand of it, is you set parameters around, how far of a change you're allowing within the merge request, so that if it goes beyond 5% increase in memory, it auto reverts back out. But that's based on that Prometheus, which is only in EEP.
Yeah, there's an auto scale function there. There's a lot of different ways to approach it, but that is the concept of thresholds.
I think we call it rollback, not revert, John. Isn't it rollback?
It is today, but there's a revert option for tomorrow where we actually can auto revert back. That's part of our vision in the blog that Mark put out in October.
In the merge request, it says revert. Customers get it. They understand what it means.
Is there a difference between revert and rollback?
No.
Okay, thanks.
And real quick, this is AJ, because we ran into this at USAA and single-handedly tied the EEP upgrade conversation from starter to Kubernetes. I can't stress enough, dig deep into their goals and initiatives and plans with Kubernetes, because that is your standing point for moving them to EEP. And also the story that we have around how we're leveraging Kubernetes, right? They really want to tap into that subject matter expertise and pulling the right people in on those conversations as well. So,
just a quick question, Joel. Do you think that customers are having a hard time putting their hands around the idea of auto DevOps? That we'd love to get there, but we're not there yet. And so maybe we'll just start on starter and then we'll get to these, because we're a year away from looking at Kubernetes and containers and that kind of stuff and being able to even take advantage of that. I'm just trying to push a merge request in, let alone doing a canary deploy.
Yeah, and so I did that webinar just a couple of weeks ago, the Automate to Accelerate webinar. At least half the questions were related to Kubernetes deployments and auto DevOps functionality, right? And if we just mention auto DevOps in passing, people go, wait, what was that? What are you talking about there? What can that do for me? The reality is, if you want to go cloud native, and if you want to move faster, but you're kind of mired in your own process and technology, what we're enabling here is, look, open up a Google Cloud account. Just put one in place. We'll take care of the rest, right? I mean, throw a credit card in with your private Google account, and you'll get a cloud presence. It's literally becoming that easy. We're going to make this thing so push button, it's going to be crazy, and everybody's going to look at it and go, oh man, we have to do that. This is so much easier than what we do today. So I think we're going that way in a big way. Auto DevOps is the conversation that is creating more interest in migrating that direction. So I really think that conversation can be driven from auto DevOps, and that's part of why I wanted to put that up here today. In addition to Kubernetes, and I don't know how often you guys are hearing this, but I've heard it from 3 different places now, and Mark Bell and I heard it first, I think, at Country Financial. They're starting to talk about artificial intelligence. What do we do with AI, and how is it going to work? And so I've been kind of thinking about this, and it's why I threw it at the bottom of the screen. If auto DevOps jump starts AI in your environment, realistically, your AI could take that template that we use and modify it and start to manage the DevOps process for you, ultimately giving you an end-to-end automation component, right? So your monitoring environment can help you with revert if needed. Your testing can be improved by the auto security components. And the AI can be tweaking as you go for version controls and all those kind of little things that we struggle with that slow our pipelines or stop them. So it's just something to think about. People are asking about this. How do we get there from here? Okay, so like I mentioned, we had some demo environment issues, and quite honestly, right now, the demo environment will not run a pipeline, but let me talk to you a little bit about what's happening and show you kind of what we've been demoing and what I think tomorrow's demo looks like. And this is something we've been talking about on the SA team just in the last 24 hours. Going forward in the demos, you see this little shortened URL. The idea would be this URL is actually active, but it's pointing to something that doesn't exist, right? If you punch this into your browser right now, you'll get a 404, or you should, unless there's a hanging chad from the problems that we had here earlier. But that should give you a 404 error. Now, the interesting thing is when you're running auto DevOps, you can copy a project and have it running in production in about 5 minutes. And so people in the room can take this and see that the site doesn't exist. We run auto DevOps. It deploys to a Kubernetes cluster. In the cloud, they reload their browser and it's active on their screen, on their phone, in the room. So the clients are actually seeing this happen real time, okay? So the idea is extremely powerful. We go from showing people environments online to saying, hey, this is live for the world. You can do this. You can be live in 5 minutes. And so if I, do this real quick, if I import my project, and I have one just queued and ready to go, and I always use the same name so that my URL works, we create a project from a baseline, right? I've got something that's already in place. And granted, my Kubernetes cluster is here, but it doesn't have to be. The video that I mentioned that Brendan just did, he actually does the deploy in GKE, and off it goes. It's really cool. And again, that video is out on YouTube, so the link is in the deck today for you to take a look at. I'm going to make the change here. I committed it. I'm going to go into turn on my Auto DevOps because it's not turned on by default in our cluster just yet. We will get there from here. But the reality is, when I mentioned the pipeline thing, right, I didn't define any of these stages. There was nothing happening here. And if I go in and look at what's happening, we said we're going to build, we're going to run a code quality analysis for you, we're going to run test, we're going to put it in production for you. These are things I didn't have to tell it what to do. It just decided it's going to do it for me. I'm going to double check my build process, and we still have a runner's problem. So my build is going to fail. Ultimately, though, you know, this has been passing for us just fine. So it takes a few minutes to run. This is about a 5 to 6 minute demo that we can run to point people to their interest in Kubernetes, simplifying their deployments, and have it live on their device in the room in just a couple of minutes. Okay, so you can see the power of that. And if we're doing this core demonstration and talking about code quality, test, build, those kind of things, that is easily an EEP discussion, because there's no real differentiation between CE and EES in this conversation. The differentiators come in EEP, and then the security differentiation comes in EEU. So based on the fact that I know I've got this problem with my runners here today, and I'm not going to be able to take this much further. I think a lot of you have seen this. If you haven't, go ahead and watch the Automate to Accelerate webinar. Go to the last, say, 20 to 25 minutes. You'll see how we shift into that. And we really do innovation type conversations here, because look, if I'm a startup, if I'm an innovative company, if I have an innovation project, if I'm working in my innovation lab, I just need an efficient way to take something and run with it, get it working, and then start making changes. This is the 5-minute solution for all those audiences. So let me pause there because I've eaten 20 minutes, and just find out what questions you have. You know, throw eggs at me if you don't believe me. Any of that kind of stuff works.
I'll say something, Joel, real quick. I love it. I think it's great, and I love that we're able to show something quickly. Something that I hear from people is, that's nice. That's a very simple, easy thing to do. I'm trying to do a big application. I've got hundreds of developers. How do I make that work in my world, right? And so when it's something very finite and very simple and easy, they go, that's great. But I have cross-project stuff, and you know, how do I make that work simply and easily?
Yeah, and you know, it's interesting because a lot of environments, if you're in a smaller environment, the small to mid-sized environments especially, they love this stuff, right? They're the first adopters. Larger environments where they've got a lot of teams don't necessarily know what to do. So I've changed the conversation there with success to be, well, use this as the stepping off point. At least get your teams in, let them start with Auto DevOps, and from there, because we can go in and see the template that's being used and see all of the different steps and jobs and all that kind of stuff to run a pipeline, use that as your stepping off point, and then add in all of the corporate process requirements that are related to that. And so that seems to resonate a little bit more as the baseline conversation versus some kind of an adequate solution.
Joel, you used 3 new terms that frankly are very new to me. Would you mind taking a moment and redefining SAST, DAST, and recon, please?
Yeah. So SAST is a static application testing. It's the idea that you're testing the code of your application, but you're not. It's just in the repository essentially, right? Or it's in its environment. It's not doing anything yet. It's just being analyzed. DAST is dynamic. Okay. Yeah, DAST is dynamic application testing. So we go one step further, fire that thing up and see what it can do. And then we look for vulnerabilities in the running application. Recon is just short for reconnaissance, like you would expect. And that's just because it's related to the environment in which the application is running. So we're running recon into that environment to make sure that its deployment is secure. And those are the three, those three terms are actually sequential stages for our implementation as well. Static, then dynamic, and then recon.
And static is getting released tomorrow.
Right, first level, yeah.
And out of curiosity, what are the two or the three items that's doing when it does its static testing? What is it actually looking for? What is it guarding against?
Well, it's looking for holes, right? You've got a bunch of dependencies out there, a bunch of things that you're pulling in to utilize in your environment. You're either leaving holes in your code or you're pulling in code with holes, and you have to be able to analyze and identify those things quickly. And so we're going to leverage a bunch of technologies that allow us to do that analysis and say, your code is secure or your code is not secure, and here's why. And
is that like a SQL injection or something like that? Is that what you're referring to?
I don't think it goes that far. Yeah, I don't think we're doing an injection testing per se. It's really more of a, here's what we know. And like I said, we're leveraging other platforms, other tools that are out there basically to do this. So we're letting them have the expertise. We're just bundling them in such a way that it has effective coverage of the code.
And what products are when you say we're using other tools, are these open source tools that we're leveraging, and they are?
A good question. I don't know. I'd have to go look at the issues to see exactly which ones we're adopting right now.
Okay, but it's okay. All right. Thank you.
I think the important thing to note is not necessarily, the things to know are basically, we're not pulling in Black Duck to do this, right? We're not pulling in somebody big and expensive to do this. And by so doing, and by using a lot of the open source stuff, we can massively, even at that price point, undercut the cost of using something like Black Duck, because that stuff's expensive. It really costs a lot. I see a couple of questions in the chat. And Matt Dorf was asking if you've got a dozen environments around the world and you want to push code, can push be automated to deploy so you don't have to do it one at a time? Absolutely, that can be done. In fact, the thing that we have right now coming out, I believe it's in 10.3. I haven't looked to confirm, but the idea of deploying to multiple Kubernetes clusters and things. I mean, we could do this today in a simple way, but in a more complex way, that should be coming out here very shortly so that you can deploy code to multiple different environments. It's going to be very slick. Any other questions in here? So lots of great comments. Oh, thanks for the link, Brendan. That's good.
Yeah, I mean, that dives 7,000 miles deep, but once you start getting into what are you really looking for, but again, leveraging open source, right? Retire.js is something people would know of if they care about the WASP top 10 and they do JavaScript, for instance. But that's like way deep.
Okay. Got time for one more question? Where's the Santa hat? It's getting warm in here. I can only take it for so long, but.
All right. Thanks very much, Joel. Appreciate it. We're not holding this session this time next week, so have a great holiday, everybody, and we'll resume in the new year.